Esteemed members of the jury, I am Devonee Trivett, and I will be defending Marcia Jones, accused of murdering her husband. Esteemed members of the jury, today we are faced with the important decision of whether or not to convict a woman whom this defense argues is blameless in the eyes of the law of murder. In order for the prosecution to convict her of this horrible crime, I must stress the importance of the legal obligations of the prosecution. It is our duty to sort through the claims that the prosecution has made and decide whether there is any reasonable doubt as to the intent of this woman when she pulled the trigger. Make no mistake. If there is any small morsel of a doubt that she intended to kill this man, that instead perhaps she intended to protect herself from further harm, then she should not be convicted of murder. Let's review this burden of proof held by the prosecution. I cannot stress how important it is that you understand that the prosecution must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that, first, the act of shooting her husband was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, performed by this woman who was repeatedly abused by her husband. Next, that the act caused social harm. And I will argue that this social harm cannot be deterred by a conviction of murder. Then, they must prove that the state of mind of the woman was that of a planned, cold-blooded killer, and that it was not in self-defense, which we have established. They must also prove that the action of this abused woman caused social harm. Additionally, we have proven that this woman acted purely in self-defense and should not be convicted of murder. Let's review the evidence in this case where such a level of proof is required. So, facts first. Here's what we know happened. After 8 years of marriage, during which her husband, Elmer Jones, repeatedly returned from home after drinking to beat her, Marcia Jones shot him during an argument when her husband became physically and verbally abusive. Once he became verbally abusive, she tried to calm him down. This demonstrates her intent to make peace. Finally, after he refused to back down, she got a revolver from the other room, and when he lunged at her, she shot him. We, the defense here, argue that ultimately, social harm was actually alleviated by ending the cycle of abuse. She was justified in the offense, as wrong as it was, because she was acting to prevent further, possibly deadly abuse. Next, the prosecution must prove her mens rea, her state of mind, that it was that of someone who intended to kill her husband. Now, there is a reasonable doubt that that is true. We contend that it cannot be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that this woman performed the act with a criminal state of mind. In the words of legal scholar Joshua Dressler, in general, a person is not guilty of a criminal offense unless it was her conscious objective to engage in the conduct that would cause the result of the substantive offense, in this case, murder. In other words, she did not intend to kill her husband until she felt that she was in danger of being killed herself. It wasn't her plan. She acted in self-defense, and therefore her act was not criminal in nature. Legal experts also point to the deterrence theory in cases such as these. Would convicting this woman of crime deter further crime on her part? The defense argues that it wouldn't. The most important question to ask yourself, esteemed members of the jury, is, was she justified in killing a man who was her abuser for years, who threatened her over and over again, who beat her repeatedly, and who was engaged in provoking an escalating cycle of violence with her? This defense argues that she is justified because she acted in self-defense. Section 3.04 of the Model Penal Code states as follows, quote, "The use of force in self-protection Use of force justifiable for protection of the person. Subject to the provisions of the section and of section 3.09, the use of force upon or toward another person is justifiable when the actor believes that such force is immediately necessary for the purpose of protecting her or himself against the use of unlawful force by such other person on the present occasion. Surely we can empathize with the position of our alleged murderess. We know that she had been beaten on repeated occasions. We know that because the cycle of violence has a pattern that she was familiar with, that pattern, after repeated cycles of abuse, that she could reasonably predict that he would beat her again and again, possibly even kill her, if she did not take action. And she has told us that he threatened to kill her. At only 5 feet 4 inches tall, she weighed a mere 120 pounds, while her husband was an imposing and frightening 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing in at 210 pounds. She had reason to be afraid. Because of these reasons, the law has several theories that would dissuade us from convicting her of murder. I cannot stress again the burden of proof the abuser's counsel faces. They are seeking to convict her of murder, but since she had reason to believe that she was in grave danger, her actions are textbook self-defense. She feared for her life. So, the counsel in defense of the plaintiff will surely try to prove that this abuse victim had a way out, that she could have found another way to protect herself. In response, we contend that Marcia Jones suffers from battered woman syndrome, defined by Mosby's Medical Dictionary as, and I quote, repeated episodes of physical assault on a woman by the person with whom she lives with or with whom she has a relationship, often resulting in serious physical and psychological damage to the woman. Marcia Jones, our defendant, was in a committed relationship with Elmer Jones for 8 years, and we know that he repeatedly returned home to beat and threaten her, causing psychological damage, most likely. Additionally, the latest literature on battered woman syndrome explains that because the plaintiff was someone she knew who was her abuser, and because this person was her longtime abuser, it is reasonable to assume that in her mind, this is her mens rea, she knew that if she did not act quickly in self-defense, she would either face grievous bodily harm or death. In light of this, the mindset that this woman is crucial. In light of this, knowing this mindset that this woman is in is crucial to understand. Her mindset at the time her husband began beating her, for what may have well been the 300th time, the mindset she was in when she quickly went into survival mode, knowing the lengths that her husband would go to hurt her and gain control over her, the mindset she was in when she pulled the trigger is essential for understanding her motive. Because she suffered from battered woman syndrome. We know that she did because she was repeatedly beaten and threatened by her aggressor. She reasonably believed, we know, that she had to kill this man in order to prevent grievous bodily harm to herself or even to prevent her own death. In the book titled The Battered Woman's Syndrome, the author explained that these victims of domestic violence have an irrational sense that the abuser is omnipresent and omniscient. Out of a need to survive, they are hyper-aware of their surroundings at all times, and they believe that their abuser is all-powerful, that they are everywhere and that they see and know everything. The author says they legitimately have reason in their minds to fear for their lives. So this is yet another reason to believe that our defendant thought she needed to kill her husband in order to spare her own life. He was not going to stop abusing her, and he was all-powerful in her mind. She didn't have a chance of survival in her mind unless she shot him. The prosecution might also ask, why would this woman stay in a relationship that is unhealthy? Why didn't she remove herself from a dangerous situation? This is a common question. So the author, Lenore A. Walker, author of Battered Woman Syndrome, describes how experts on battered women syndrome now know that a person experiencing this type of abuse typically goes through stages of realization about their abuse. And these stages are as follows. First, there's the denial stage. The woman is unable to accept that she's being abused. She simply believes that this was an isolated incident that she can contain, and that if she does things differently, the threats and violence will stop. That's the first stage. Next, the guilt stage. She believes she has caused the abuse. Leaving will not stop because she is responsible for what has been done to her. If only she did better, he would stop. If she cleaned the house better, if she took better care of him, if she talked to him differently, if she was better at cleaning the house, if she was better at making sure he was happy. Countless times this man threatened her and bludgeoned her, reinforcing this belief. Countless times she had made excuses for him that it was her fault that he abused her, so she stayed in the situation. Now, if she is lucky, she gets to the next phase where she realizes that she didn't cause the abuse. This usually takes some time in therapy, and not all women have access to therapy or are able to get it because the abuser tends to isolate the victim. So she stayed in her relationship. Again, the author of Battered Woman Syndrome explains that women also often do not leave their abuser because, in many cases, it simply is too dangerous. The statistics on the matter show us that often trying to leave a situation such as this puts the woman in imminent danger of deadly violence. And that women who do try to leave during this time period, the time span of when they are attempting to leave their abuser, that more often than not, women are killed during this period. There are no easy answers with this situation, so we cannot expect that it is easy to leave the abuser. And in the woman's mind, it may be impossible, particularly because she was suffering from battered woman's syndrome. So if we put ourselves in her situation, it is certainly understandable that this woman believed herself to be in grave danger, and her fears were not unfounded. The bottom line is that she clearly killed in self-defense, and she did not begin her evening intending to kill her husband. The final two things to consider are this. Will it protect the public good to convict this woman? And is there a reasonable doubt that she was intending to kill her husband and not simply reacting in self-defense? Well, these answers are clear. It will not be acting in the public's best interest to punish her. This woman has been punished enough, and punishing her more would not make society better or safer. There is no reason to convict this woman of a crime because it would not protect the public good by doing so. And yes, there is a reasonable doubt that she shot the gun with the intention to kill rather than to self-defend, and she should not be convicted. Based on all of this, the best decision here in determining the outcome of this case is an acquittal of criminal charges, because this battered woman acted in self-defense after having received repeated threats and beatings from the man she shot. Members of the jury, we move that the defendant be acquitted of the charge of murder on the grounds that she acted in self-defense. Thank you.